Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Line of Sight podcast, where today my guest is Jeremy, who is one of the, I guess you'd say, the brains behind, the motivators, the administrators behind the Richmond Open, a gaming convention in Central Virginia. So, Jeremy, thank you for joining me on the Line of Sight podcast.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm happy to do it.
So let's, I always start the same way with everyone, so listeners can get to know you just a little bit. So tell me, a couple minutes, how did you get into tabletop gaming?
Well, let's see. I didn't do any tabletop gaming at all until college. No RPGs or miniatures or anything like that. I was always video games, and I would do that thing that we did in the 90s where I would bring my computer over my buddy's house and we would network them all together. And
the LAN party.
LAN parties, exactly. And we would play, StarCraft, Warcraft, stuff like that. We'd play different video games and all that stuff. So I did that. And then I got to college, and the guys next door, one of them was big into D&D. So he was like, "Hey, you want to play D&D?" And I said, "I don't know what this D&D thing is. That sounds great." So I joined in. I think we did first edition with second edition rules with some I don't even know if 3.5 was out at the time or third edition or what. And kind of started there, and then played a lot of RPGs throughout college. Kind of played some minis games here and there, and then when I got out, just kind of started playing different things. I got picked up Star Trek Attack Wing was kind of the main game that I started playing a while back, and then kind of moved to Armada. That was my main one, and then just kind of branched out from there. So it wasn't something where I've got minis from when I was 5 years old. I didn't have any of that, but started back in 2000. So that was my intro into miniature gaming.
Found it a bit later in life, but you still found it.
That's right. That's right. Still made it there eventually.
Yeah, you made it there eventually. So then I guess that's a perfect segue then. And so you started into tabletop games later in life, and yet you are making a leap to something that I imagine 90% of most tabletop players will never do, and that's organize a gaming convention. So talk a little bit about the Richmond Open. When did you start it? Why did you start it?
Sure.
What is it?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So it was kind of one of those things back in, I think it was 2021, coming out of the pandemic and just, kind of obviously playing things like tabletop, online tabletop, whatever that one is there, during the pandemic and all that stuff, kind of coming out of it and seeing everybody kind of, just wanting to play more stuff as they were kind of coming out. And so a buddy of mine, we were like, well, let's do an Armada Legion event, just kind of setting something up, right? Nothing too big, we just kind of wanted something where we can get them together. It was kind of a nothing that Richmond really had from the larger perspective, and so we wanted to do that. So we kind of looked around at some space. Richmond isn't huge into the space that they've got available for conventions, so it is kind of kind of frustrating. We don't have huge convention centers all around like Indianapolis or Milwaukee or stuff like that. So we kind of started there. We were like, oh, it's kind of expensive to do that. We were like, well, if we only have these two games, what if we add X-Wing to it? And, that kind of made the numbers work a little bit better. And we were like, well, what if we add, a buddy of mine did 30K. And I was like, what if we add 30K to it? And then another friend was like, well, what if I, organize another, game? And so we kind of just started organically kind of building out the roster of games that we wanted to play. And, that was probably in the, I don't know, I'd say July-ish of 2021. And so I called a buddy of mine and, who's real good math-wise. He's a good math brain. And this guy, Sean, who actually does our floor plan. He's one of the executive committee. We have about 7 people. And I said, all right, Sean, what are we looking at here? We want to put this together. We want, how many tables and all that stuff. And we want to do it in October. And he just laughed. He was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. We're not, we can't put this together in, 3 months or 2 months or whatever it is. And so I said, okay, all right. I was like, well, how about we, kind of go back to the drawing board, and we kind of build something out, maybe out in, we looked at the calendar for 2022 and it was like, well, you've got Nova, which happens in the end of the year around like September. You've got Adepticon in March. You got Gen Con in July. And then obviously a number of other kind of smaller conventions around. And so it was like, how about, May works pretty well. So we kind of hit upon the end of May, and, all the space that we were looking at, which was probably about the November timeframe, October timeframe at this point, kind of looking out for May, was available on Memorial Day, of course, right? Nobody wants to run a gaming convention on Memorial Day. That's what they told us. So we said, the heck with you guys. We're gonna schedule it. So we scheduled. We got the convention center downtown. We toured it. It was like 2 or 3 of us at the time. Kind of toured it, looked at it, and we took one of the ballrooms. So we put together about 250 people showed up. So it was a good amount of stuff. Like not a huge convention. But just enough to kind of wet our whistle on like how to do it. We definitely kind of learned a lot of things that first year about what not to do, what to do, how to kind of run it, how to bring in some vendors. I think we had like 4 vendors at the time. So we kind of started there. And then the next year we said, okay, let's try this again. And so then we planned again for May, but we were like, well, let's not do it in the end of May because, Memorial Day, everybody's on vacation and all that. So we brought it to the beginning of May, and we got another space in the convention center. But, we got a lot of kind of pushback from people about things like parking and going down into the city and just kind of like not being able to find it and stuff like that and traffic and all that stuff. So, we did that one. That was our second one that had about 500 people. And then last year we jumped to Meadow Event Park. And so our goal every year has kind of been like, okay, what are the 2 biggest problems that we have? And we do a survey. So we put out a survey to everybody and we say, okay, what things did you like? What things didn't you like? There's obviously like, 20, 30 questions on there. We pick kind of the 2 biggest pain points that people had and we try to fix those. So we did that from year 1 to year 2. Then we did it from year 2 to year 3 was actually our biggest jump where people were complaining about the parking. Concessions were kind of their big 2 things. And so we jumped to Meadow Event in Doswell, right near Paramount Kings Dominion. Maybe it's not Paramount anymore. And so that was a great space. They were really generous, kind of helping us out. And so we went over there last year. People loved it. Parking, we were able to kind of roll that into the ticket, which was great. Giant parking space, which is awesome. Parking lot, which is awesome. And like 30,000 square feet. So it was a good jump. So we had about 770 people last year. And so then this year we're doing it at Meadow Event again, shooting for about 1,000 people. But like, each year we've kind of done that where, it's kind of like, we focus on kind of what people loved about it, what they didn't love about it. Always a focus on the community about, if we have TOs that want to run a game, we try to support them. We try to really empower them with, convention support of either, kind of just giving them the ropes on how to run a game in a big convention or some prize support or, whatever we can kind of do to make them, definitely feel kind of that empowered sense and, doing something for their community. And that's always kind of been our focus.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there. So
no, I'm just going to ramble away. So I appreciate
as
it.
you mentioned, you've actually seen like pretty steady growth, almost adding 250 people each year. Now,
that's been
how much of
good.
that has been you like reaching out to say, hey, when did you bring in 40K? And did someone come to you with that, or did you go to them, or someone comes up with bolt action? Did you say, hey, let's try and reach out to the historicals? How much has it been you reaching out, and how much have people just, as the convention has grown, they've come to you and said, hey, I want to run an event?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because it is kind of like when you get that kind of snowball effect, it gets a little easier. So like right now, we have a lot of people that are coming to us. We put out last year, we kind of experimented with the put your own event in the system. The first 2 years, we put it in for you. So if somebody came to us and said, hey, we want to run a MCP, Marvel Crisis Protocol, right? Then we would put it in the system for them, kind of set it all up for them and, kind of arrange prize support with different vendors and different sponsors and kind of do a lot of that legwork ourselves. and kind of like bring the TO along. Like, okay, here's how you kind of do it. And we've seen this year that a lot of the TOs have said, okay, well, I'll put the event in the system myself. I know how to do it. And then we go to them and we say, what do you need for prize support? And it's like, oh, well, I spoke to this, vendor who, has been with you guys for 2 years and they're going to provide prize support. Oh, awesome. That sounds great. And it's because, we've kind of like shown the TOs how to do that. They're always welcome to come to us and say, hey, I'm lacking some, or I don't have quite enough. What can you guys, give us? And we can always kind of figure that out. But, it's been really cool to see, some of these TOs kind of grow into the role of, a convention TO versus, a TO that just might be running something at their local store. But to your point, the first year, because I think that's what you're actually asking about, the first 2 years was us very much going to the community and saying, like calling up James, for example, with MCP, I use that as an example. So James Prince runs our MCP event. I called him up and was like, hey, James, you know the community really well. You know the game really well. You've run smaller events. What do you think about running at Richmond Open? And he and I talked about it, kind of the pros and cons of it. And, how can we help him and all that stuff. And so, that was kind of that initial conversation. And now, he's put in the system, he's talking to people for prize support, he's kind of doing all that stuff. And then he obviously is talking to his local community and the community at large to kind of draw people in. So, it's one of those things where we kind of started with kind of, bringing in people and then they kind of learned it. 40K though, you mentioned 40K.
Actually, I can tell you, as someone who actually did last year is the first time that I did I ran a couple demos for one page
Nice.
rules. And I got to tell you, the self-organizing thing was fantastic because I could go in, take as much time as I wanted, figure out the system, and then I had to make some changes. And I just went in, deleted this, added this. Mm-hmm. And I could only imagine you having to do that for dozens of people. So as someone on the other end of that was absolutely perfect. And as far as I think it works because I remember last year the Marvel Crisis Protocol that was pretty good. I think there were like probably
32 players there.
Yeah. So it was huge. But anyways, you were saying
well, no,
40K table is always really, really big. I remember that.
Yeah,
like half of the showroom is that.
Yeah, I was going to say first, before you get off that topic, Owen over at Nova Open, I just wanted to give a shout out to because Owen has been amazing to kind of help us out. We work pretty closely with the Nova Open crew and they've, him and Mike, like there's a lot of people over there that we've worked with to kind of learn how to kind of do things. They're always open for questions and all that. And Owen is the one who runs their event system and, manages all the events. So, if you think that like me and, Brian Fisher, for example, who's our event coordinator, like if you think we get overwhelmed by it, they have a lot of events in their system. And so I don't know how he manages it, but they're kind of a wealth of knowledge. And so we've really kind of leaned on them a lot, to really help out and answer some questions. We even actually, this year when we had our ticket sales open up, badges and tickets open up, we actually had an issue that was like anything in tabletop events. If you know tabletop events, there's always like one pull down bar or checkbox that needs to be done somewhere deep in the system for like everything to work correctly. And there was a situation we had with 40K where we did bundle badges for the first time this year for 40K. And so like something wasn't quite working right. And I like called Owen and was like, Owen, help me. And he was like, all right, he put me on Zoom. Like he sent me a link, we got on Zoom and I shared my screen and he's like, okay, hold on. I think I know what it is. He's like, click this, click that, click over here, click this thing. Yeah. That pull down bar, it says no, you got to say yes. And then I said yes, and then everything worked. So, I mean, just it's a good system. It's it's great. But I mean, if you have one little issue with it, the whole thing can come apart. And so anyway, before we get into 40K, I just wanted to shout out to Owen because he is definitely amazing. Kind of helping us out. But the 40K. So we didn't have it the first year. And the first year we're in the ballroom and I remember, I don't remember his name. I apologize. There was a guy who plays locally and he came up to me, while I'm walking around and talking to people and all that. And he was like, hey, have you thought about doing 40K in here? And I said, yeah, sure. I was like, I'll do any game in here that anybody wants to do. That's the whole point of a community convention. And he was like, well, I know this guy, JD, who's, starting up this company and away games. And, he's really like, they've got terrain. They kind of come in, they bring judges, they market. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Right. So he connected me up with JD, and JD, I think it was about 6 months into away games. And, I talked to JD and I said, what can we do to help you out? And obviously come to Richmond Open and run a 40K convention or a 40K event. And so, he and I kind of, throughout the year, kind of back and forth, what can we do here? What can we do here? Kind of helping him market stuff and, kind of answering different questions that he had. And we kind of built out the 40K side. They marketed it out. They brought all the stuff at the convention. They brought the terrain, all that. And, it became like his biggest event at Richmond Open. And so since then, since 2023, I guess, is when he did his first one, they've kind of used that as kind of a jumping off point for, running events all around the country. I know we have a joke between us that we only call each other while we're in the car. Because every time I call him, it'll sound like he's in the car, and I'm like, where are you going? He's like, oh, I'm driving to Texas, or I'm driving to Missouri, or I'm driving somewhere. And, he's got another event. And so, it's that kind of organic organization that we've kind of leaned on for a lot of our TOs where, we just say to them, what do you need from us to make this successful? What else can we give you? When it comes to, prize support, like we get, some of our vendors, we have sponsors and vendors. So like Army Painter, for example, was one where, Army Painter, they just sent us a box of stuff. They said, here you go. We're a sponsor. Here's a box of stuff. It was, there's all kinds of things in there. There was paint. There was, wet palettes. There was just like paintbrushes. There was all kinds of things you'd imagine. And so when we have sponsors like that, we can kind of set that stuff aside and then take stock of it and say, okay, well, what are we missing? What holes can we fill for the different TOs where, one TO might say, okay, I've got a couple of like maybe store credit cards or something from, a local game store, but, we need some product or something. And so, I'll say, well, I've got 4 or 5 things I can give you. What about this? And it's like, oh yeah, it sounds great. And so, we try to really support the TOs that way because we know that, they're the connector point into their community. Like we're not going to be a part, between the 7 of us, like I said, the executive committee, we're not going to be in every game community. So our goal is really, to kind of touch on each of our items. So we have, I kind of do the financial stuff. I do any of the like venue stuff. We've got Brian doing the event stuff. Like I said, I mentioned Sean does our floor plans. Chris does our registration. We have a vendor coordinator. We have a sponsor coordinator. So like amongst the 7 of us, we kind of take those different roles. And then from there kind of out to the next level are the TOs. And then out to the next level are the players that come in. So that's kind of how we build it. That way, it's not overwhelming for me or for any one person.
Okay. So kind of building off that. And so basically you're organizing the organizers. Now, how much experience did you have before that running event level stuff, running a tournament of, in a local gaming store? And was it a big jump if you did, was it a big jump to go from running one event to then stepping up to running a convention where you're now managing lots of events? Like what would be if someone was interested in doing what you do here, they want to start a convention maybe where they live, where there's a gap and there's nowhere for people to have such a thing. What would prep them for that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Cause I think like I didn't, I'm not, my background is in real estate. So it's not in, convention management or anything like that. Like I don't focus on that, or have not. And so, I've been to a lot of events, obviously. I've been to Nova. I've been to, Adepticon and Gen Con and all that stuff. I think those are the 3 I keep naming. But, I've never had any experience in managing kind of a larger convention. But from the real estate side, obviously I, basically a project manager. It's like, okay, we got to get this deal to fruition. I need, a team of people. And so I'm, very well versed in kind of managing the team of people that then kind of does their respective roles. And I think that's where I kind of pull that experience from. But from the convention side of it, no, I didn't have any experience kind of, either running a small convention, large convention or events at all. And so, I'd say for somebody who wants to get into it, I think the biggest thing is really to kind of find a group, because the first year I like to say that I kind of created it out of force of will. It just kind of, I just kept pushing forward. And, I had a client of mine who, he's pretty big in the local area. And he was like, hey, if you guys need some money, let me know. I'll help you out. I know you're good. I don't know anything about tabletop gaming, but, I'm willing to kind of write the check and help you a little bit. And so financially, that was a huge thing that helped us out.
Okay.
And then
Holy cow.
that's always the thing you need. And then from the experience, I just kind of like continuously put, just reaching out to people. I say like, it isn't weird now, but like calling people up and saying, hey, what can you send us? Like,
I imagine that would be a little awkward. And actually, that was one thing I was going to ask. So you get like official support from companies like Army Painter that pretty much anyone who's been in tabletop gaming for a little while has at least heard the name or used the product. So how long before you were able to get that kind of support? Was it right at the first year? Was it once you started getting third year? When did you start being able to make those connections?
Yeah, it was basically it was like the second year. Because the first year, like as much as I'm, kind of pushing it forward and we have, a couple of the people that are part of the exec committee now and a few of the TOs that were kind of helping us, in the first year. There were people in the community that were like, I don't think this is real. Like if I buy a badge, is this actually going to happen? And are you just like fleecing money off us? And so, I mean,
Wow.
like that was the kind of the viewpoint at the moment where, we almost had to convince people that we were real, that it was really a convention. Like, no, seriously, guys, we're actually doing this. And so I think after the first year, word got out, like I think we did it pretty well. Again, we put that focus on TOs. That was kind of our focal point because we said, well, if we support them, like we brought food in, we were kind of like Johnny on the spot for volunteers of like, there were TOs that came up to me afterwards that were like, hey man, this was the best convention I've had in the way of TO support where, if they needed something, we were like, cool, what do you need? Like, oh, you need another prize? You missing? Sure, we'll grab that for you. Like, or you need some food, like, here's some pizza. Like, you guys are walking around all day and judging stuff like, and so we were definitely putting a focus on the TO side. And so I think that kind of built a good amount of goodwill after the first year that then the second year people were like, oh, okay, so, it's real. Let's check
This is
that box.
legitimate. And
It's
it's
legitimate,
done
right? It's
well.
really, yeah, like, okay, it's real. And then I think like, Away Games jumping on board, was like a 40K event. So they were like, oh, okay, so you have a 40K event, you have, the same events you had last year, but you're expanding out now. And so, it just kind of started from there, started growing from that point. But, that first year, there was definitely, there was mistakes made that, if I was looking back on it, I'd be like, well, why did I do that? Like, for example, we have stand-up signs, right? We have, and you've seen them, you've been there, where we
Yep.
have like the roll-up signs that say, bolt action, let's say, right? So it'll say bolt action, and then it'll have, our Richmond Open logo, and it says Richmond Open 2022. Yeah. Whoops. Like, like never gonna do this again, apparently. And so
Yeah, just get generic ones. Don't put any
so
information that pins you down to place, time, or location. Forget
exactly.
that.
So what we did was the second year we said, okay, well that was a dumb move. Like, why did we put the year on the signs? Like, whoops. And so what we did is we kind of spun that around, and the second year we did like our kind of like I guess our theme for the website. We didn't really have a theme for the convention, but we had like what it looked like, and it was like spray paint, right? And our internal theme was like, Richmond Open 2023. Oh God, we're doing this again, right? Like, and so it was like, quick, spray paint it, make it look good. And so we ordered stickers, like these vinyl stickers that had 2023 or 20, maybe it was either 2023 or 23, and we stuck them on the signs over the 2022. So it looked like, and some of them, they were small enough where you could still see the 2022 behind it, but it was like we spray painted 2023
Oh, that's
over the
clever.
2022 to be
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, we're doing this again.
This was intentional, folks. We meant to do that.
It was totally meant. Oh, look at that. Theme wise, it looks great. And
Now,
so, so that was like one of those mistakes that you look back on and you're like, what was I thinking? Like, oops, didn't mean that. And so, there's stuff like that where you kind of learn it along the way. But yeah, I mean, calling people up and asking them, what are you going to send, or what are you going to, how are you going to support us, or whatever. And and obviously we do social media stuff. We do tabletop riders where we have signs for the vendor or the sponsors and vendors. Meadow Event actually has a thing above the ceiling where we didn't know it until we had kind of like walked in, where they have bars where you can hang banners. And so we were like, oh, that's cool. Like, we didn't know that. And so, we've reached out to sponsors about send us a banner, like we'll put it up there. And so you have that side of it where you have to kind of like shed off the hangups of asking people for stuff. And then on the flip side of it, there are just people out there that, like Stevie with Baron of Dice, who are like, how can I support you guys? What do you need? And he's done our dice the last couple years. They've been a vendor. Last year they were a vendor for the first time.
Last year, I think I probably bought about 3 or 4 sets just
yeah.
they're there.
Well,
if any of you listening aren't familiar, Baron of Dice sells custom dice. Like whatever game you play, they have dice with a specific design for all of it. Like it's unbelievable how many different sets of dice they have. So if you don't have your custom set of dice for your army yet, you head on over there and I guarantee you'll find it. So I was ecstatic when I noticed he was there because I don't think they had everything, but just shelves and shelves and shelves of dice.
And Philippe is amazing. Philippe is the one they sent because Stevie had something else going on that weekend. So he was like, I'll send Philippe down. And I only knew Stevie. So Philippe showed up and I was like, man, I don't know if you can pull a more charismatic person out to send down here. And I mean, he posted videos about just showing off the dice and all that. And I was like, it was great. And so, he and I hung out the whole weekend and I'm pretty sure he's coming back. And I think he's bringing Stevie this time, which is really cool. But yeah, their dice are amazing. And we had the Kings of War dice. Our convention last year was actually the first time they sold it in public. And so they brought like tons of Kings of War dice. And then we were able to give out Kings of War dice to the Kings of War winners, which was awesome because, it was brand new. And so, you obviously have to have that kind of, no hangups about kind of asking people for stuff and things like that. You have to have, vendors and sponsors that are willing to work with you. I mean, and as much as I say some like Baron of Dice is amazing, I mean, there are some that are like, are you 2,000 people yet? No? Okay, well, call us when you are. And so, I mean, there are vendors and sponsors who do that as well, where they just don't see the benefit of having the smaller conventions. And then you just, you have to have kind of a game plan, a business plan. I mean, it is, it isn't just kind of a bunch of people getting together and rolling dice. Like there is, like I've signed the contract for the, Meadow Event Park. And so I'm on the hook for the contract. And, there's like financial stuff that you have to buy. And we've got a whole budget set up where, from the first year to the second year to the third year and now to the fourth year, we've, budgeted out, okay, how much do we think we need for this? And we change that every year. What do we need for, prize support to TOs? What do we need for, signage and things like that? And how is that going to look this year? And so, you have to approach it as a business, even if you're, a nonprofit or 501c3, like however you build it, you have to look at it like that. Because if, at the end of the day, like if you say, okay, everybody's going to get together and, we'll all throw in $10 and, we'll all play and it'll be a great time. And then the bill comes due and it's like, oh, wait, the space was 10 grand. Like, oh, well, oof, we didn't make that much. And so then, you're on the hook for that. So, so there's a lot of different elements that I think somebody starting off a convention needs to look at, not just from the gaming side of it, but from the, the business side of it. Having those sponsors come in. A lot of our sponsors too, they put in product. And so, a lot of it is not like, we'll write you a $10,000 check or a $5,000 check or something like that. Like we're not at that point and at that level. But from our perspective, like, Meadow Event, like I said, is really great. They work with us really well, just kind of as a space and as a local convention to say, okay, let's cut you some deals, let's work with you. Like they've got tables and chairs that they kind of give us. And a lot of times they kind of lump that into the agreement. And it's not, an arm and a leg. Obviously, we still rent tables and chairs to kind of make up the difference. But, they help us there. And, so like that goes a long way as well to kind of help us be able to do it because, at the end of the day, like it's about the players, it's about the attendees and, whatever we can do to kind of give them a good time. And I love just like, I was, you and I were probably at Waterloo the other day and I just heard like a couple people talking about it and they were like, hey, we're getting ready for Richmond Open. Man, that's a great convention. Like, I had a great time. And, I'm not part of the conversation. I'm just sitting there listening, but I'm like, that's
But
just
it's
a
nice
really
to
good
hear.
feeling.
That's absolutely
Yeah.
nice to hear. So then 2 questions because you brought in 2 interesting topics. So I'll throw out both the questions, answer in whatever order you want. So the first one is how much time then do you have to dedicate weekly, monthly, from one convention to the next? And then the other question is, with all the effort and work you have to put into running this convention, does it ever risk turning your hobby into work and that kind of starts to ruin it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I'd say from the first one, it definitely, like, we're in May, 1st of May is when we run it. And so from the point where it's over in May, usually there's just kind of like a lag time till about, I would say, well, from the vendor side, it never ends. So the vendor side, like, we turn right around after we did the last year, and George, who's our vendor coordinator, he just starts calling vendors again. He's like, "Hey, you guys had a good time. Let's sign you up again." We send them the agreement and everything like that. And then there are definitely, so there's the vendors who think about it ahead of time. So we're focused on that till about, I'd say, probably September. So like May to September, and it's just calling them, just doing a list of vendors. So it's not a lot of time that it takes, but it's a lot of like follow up here and there of just kind of calling them. And so then there's usually a lag time for vendors. There's a lag time for the holidays, so they stop talking about anything right around October, and then they don't start back up until probably January, February. So right now, as we're getting that second wave of vendors, so for our vendor coordinator, that's kind of his schedule, so he has that lag time. And then for everything else, it kind of like slows. There's not really a whole lot to do until, I'd say, probably November. And that's when we start kind of finalizing the stuff of like, okay, we've been talking about it, but what are we going to do for a theme? So like this year, our theme is ghosts and Ghostbusters and stuff like that. And we were kind of batting that around for a while. And we've got things like, we reached out to a couple local people, and we're going to have Ghostbusters on site, and we're going to have, our
Nice.
dice are ghost themed. And, we reached out to TOs about, hey, try to do some ghost stuff, and just kind of a general theme. And so we kind of bat that around, but November is when we kind of start like actually, putting all the stuff in the site, kind of getting it all ready. And then, the events usually open up probably around December, I think, middle, November, December, right around there. So people can actually put their events in the system. And then badges opened up January 15th. So then once badges open up, there's like that initial, probably a month of, just kind of like answering questions for people, and, the events are filling up and kind of tracking all that. And there's that initial surge. And then usually right around now is when it kind of dies down a little bit, and it kind of, bumps along the bottom for the signups. You'll have like a couple people a day sign up here, sign up there, but you don't have that massive surge. And, so usually it just takes a little bit of kind of managing time, just kind of going into the system, updating the budget, like where are we at number wise, reaching out to more vendors and sponsors just here and there, kind of, stuff is coming in. Like we've got, I've got boxes kind of surrounding me. I turn my garage is actually a game room. And so I've got like boxes filling up in here already that vendors and sponsors are sending us. And so that kind of like happens throughout the time. And then usually around, I'd say like end of March, is when it starts to ramp back up again. And, people kind of ending, they're done with Adepticon, they're coming out of that. And then they're kind of like, okay, what's our next convention? And, they focus on us. So April is usually when we kind of get a surge again. So we're kind of dealing with, the different events that are in there, just answering a lot of questions. More vendors will pop up because as the word gets out there and we kind of do more social media stuff, like vendors will then say, oh, okay, and give us a heads up that they want to show up, and they'll sign up and all that. And some of them we just have to ping multiple times. Like for example, the other day we had Kit with Game Envy is going to join us this year, so that's awesome, because Kit we've seen him at so many events, and I'm like, your Lucent lights are amazing, your wet palettes are amazing. And so we've just kind of been like, hey man, join us. Like, what are you doing? Come on over here. And we talked to him at Nova, and he was like, all right, circle back after the holidays, and, we'll figure it out. And then we talked to him over the weekend. He was like, all right, I'm in, let's do this. And so he's going to join us this year. So sometimes it's just kind of like, it doesn't take a lot of like day-to-day time. but it's just kind of like that follow-up
And
time,
dirt.
just kind of pinging
Okay.
them.
Okay.
And then kind of like that last month is, kind of when all the stuff starts to arrive, the t-shirts arrive, the signs arrive, the, kind of finalizing the contracts for like the tables, making sure we have enough. That's when Sean's head kind of explodes for, the number of events and tables, and he's doing the floor plan and kind of making sure that everything is good, and everybody has space. And then, it's beginning of May. And so that's when we hit the ground. And Thursday we do setup day. That's, a complete day, that we come in, we set up, they set up the tables for us, but we always kind of move them around a little bit as we need them. Vendors come in and start setting up on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we're done, and we rinse and repeat for the next year.
Wow. And then, with all that, then does it ever cross that boundary where it turns your hobby into work? Or are you able to separate the two? There's work and
Yeah,
play.
I think that's a great question. So the funny part, and the thing that I always tell people is like, when it's like, oh man, yeah, this is a cool convention, and I was like, yeah, and I'm the only one who can't play in it. Like,
Right,
so
right.
right. So, my goal was that I was like, Richmond, this area just didn't have a convention, didn't have something local to us, something that we, local players can come to, and it can be our own thing. And that if you want to run a game, like you were talking about one-page rules before we came on here, if you want to there we go. If you want to run a one-page rules event, you can go on our system and you can sign up to do it, and we will give you table space and you can run it. And so like, I wanted to have something like that. And so I think the focus of it being on the community is what prevents it from becoming kind of another job. I also don't get paid. So, I mean, that's another thing where, it will never kind of like pay the bills or anything like that to me. It's just, everything goes back in, and we, save it all for the next year and kind of be in a better financial position if we can do that for the next year. So because of that, it's still kind of that hobby. And the community element kind of brings, that hobbiness, that joy to it. Where if it was like, I know there's other conventions out there. Like I know LVO is like Frontline Gaming and stuff like that. And like they're a company that actually runs their
Right.
convention. Like then they're a job, or Gen
So here
Con where there's like
I've got it for
company
you.
for it.
You're not
What's that?
able to actually play the tabletop games, but the convention becomes your tabletop game.
It becomes
The floor plan is your terrain, the people are the minis, and your job is to make sure
exactly.
everything tactically goes where it needs to.
I never thought about that, but okay. Yeah, you're
All
right.
you
There
need
we
now
go.
is some absolutely huge dice that you can roll around on the floor.
That's what I need. Exactly. And I mean, I think there is an element to that of like, so one of the things I wanted to do when we were starting the convention is, and players have kind of said this to me over the last couple of years. And so I know it's kind of like just gone out to everybody, is that I wanted the one where, like, I always remember back in like 2016, 2014, something like that, I went to Gen Con, and it was my first like big convention. And I walked down the aisle, like the main aisle, and I always remember there was like, they have it set up so there's like a table and they're playing MCP, and then there's a table and they're playing Saga, and then there's a table and they're playing Armada, and then there's and like as you're walking down, you're just like, you're having the historical gamers next to the sci-fi gamers, next to the war gamers, next to the RPG players. And like that is what I kind of wanted to bring into it, because I was like, these communities can feel very segregated in the fact that like they go to a store and they have, a 40K event or a 30K event or whatever it is, but they don't interact with the other communities as well and kind of see the different games out there. And so I wanted something where it was like one big space. Like I want everybody to be in the same space. And so then they all can kind of see each other and interact with each other. And I've had multiple times where I walk, I'm talking to somebody and it's like, I'll walk over to a table and it'll be somebody that I know plays 40K and they're looking at Bolt Action. And it's like, I've never seen this game before. And they're watching it like, this game is amazing. And so like that kind of, cross-pollination between communities is something I always wanted. And so I think that players have said that it feels that way, which is great. One person I think last year was like, this feels like an old time convention, like the way they used to be. And I was like, that's perfect. That's what I'm going for.
So have you ever then from the convention picked up a game, like you were at the convention, you saw someone playing it, you said, I've never seen this, but I gotta have it, and then you jumped in?
I mean, I don't own a Chariot table, but if you haven't played the Chariot game,
I
I
have.
highly recommend it.
Ron, the guy who runs it,
Yes.
he's a regular at Waterloo, and yeah,
Yep.
he pretty frequently runs that, and he always said it was a huge hit for folks. When I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head, but it's a chariot race game, old one, very old
Mm.
one. But he's adapted it, and he got like some official printer to make a gaming board it's like 10 feet long, maybe not that long,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's
it's
huge,
huge.
so that you can play with the full size chariots from games like Hail
Well, not the
Caesar.
full size Chariots, but I mean,
And well, I mean, that would
you,
be there's
you know,
okay, that's for next year. There's one of
next
your
year we'll do
adventures
that next year. We'll do
in
that
the
next year.
parking lot. But,
Exactly.
it's great because it's a very simple game to get into. For
Mhm.
new people, you're only managing your one chariot, and the amount of things you can do with it, there's only a half a dozen or so, and you'll see, young kids playing it, older players, you'll see men and women playing, like,
Yep.
anybody who
Anybody
plays
plays it.
that
I mean,
has fun with
my
it.
my 8-year-old daughter at the time, she was 8 at the time, last year, she played it along with like JD was playing it, who runs away games. He was playing it with some of his away games guys. And, and there was just like all in between, there was older people playing it, younger people playing it. And so it is like, that's another thing that we kind of always try to focus on as well is reaching out to the communities to be like, do you have something big? Like something big, like the Castle Assault game, for example. The guy, he builds this giant castle and it's like a huge castle wall. And then he has minis that are probably, I mean, what,
Yeah,
like
they're
60
almost
millimeters?
yeah,
Something like
yeah,
that.
they're
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 big.
they're a big size.
Yeah. And you're assaulting the castle and you've got defenders. And it's that kind of game where you also want people to walk by and just look at it and be like, what is that? Like you want, so you don't want just the games that are, the tournament games, the RPG games. You want those like big convention games as well. Like I'm talking to, Waterloo about doing like a Battle of Kurtz, like a tank game or something where you do a big table and you have all the tanks and the chariot game is good. So and obviously I've seen games like people will sign up for some games. I'm like, I've never heard of that. And so I'll make a point to kind of walk around and look at the games. And so I've definitely kind of gotten into it. I think I've got the, gaming ADD where it's like, well, that's a fun game. Let me buy a starter set. And that's a fun game. Let me buy a starter set. And so, I've definitely done that there, but, it just brings a lot of joy to it to kind of see all these communities kind of being in the same place and having players play the different games that they never would have even known about, because if you want to play a historical game, you have to go at a certain time to a certain place, like Waterloo, for example. Like you have to go to Waterloo at a certain time. And if you're playing 40K, you may never do that. But if you're playing 40K at Richmond Open, you look 3 tables over and they're playing Saga. And you're like, what is that game? Like, that's pretty cool. And so, it kind of brings that cross pollination to the communities, which is really neat.
So for everyone listening, I cannot. I've just tried looking online to find the name of that chariot race game. I'll find it and I'll put it down in the comments in case folks are looking at it. But I have yet to hear someone who didn't play it and have a ton of fun and want to try it again. So I'll put that one in there. But I totally agree with you that
Yeah.
it's gaming kind of tends to create silos because
Mhm.
you've got, I mean, specific rule sets, specific models, and so everyone meets on say Thursday night for this game. But if you want to play this game, that's Tuesday nights. Whereas if you've now got a place where everyone's playing them at the same time, you can just meander around and see people play, test out new games, and then for all you know, one of the vendors is probably selling a starter box of it. Like
Right.
you can get
Right.
it right then and there.
And that's what we
So
tell the vendors too, is that we say, they'll come in and like, let's say Atlantis is coming in, so they're a more generic kind of store that has a lot of different things. And they'll say, what events are being played. And it's like, okay, well, here's our events list. So, you may want to bring more stuff that kind of focuses on that because then, people will play and then they'll walk over and they'll be like, oh, that expansion I needed. Oh, it's right there. And they'll grab it, and so we do try to tell our vendors, hey, they're bringing this stuff. But we also love from the vendor side of it as well. We also try to focus on like local artisans and people that, you just wouldn't see. You either have to go onto an Etsy store or you have to go somewhere like, Gabby, for example, is a great vendor that we've had. We actually had her the first year. So I always want to shout her out. She's with Bra Full of Sawdust and she does woodworking.
oh
And
yes,
so
yep.
Oh yeah, she does like the dice trays. She does, all kinds of different things. There's one that she does where it's like a D&D kind of tray where it's got all the things, and you could put dice in there, like the 6-sided, 20-sided, to track all your spells and all those things. So a lot of gaming focused things, and so stuff like that. And now I've actually seen her stuff at Battlegrounds, which is cool. But like, initially it was like, okay, well, we want stuff like that. Like we want, you know, things and products that you don't just go to a game store and buy, but you might have to dig in Etsy a little bit to find these things. And so like those kind of vendors are cool to have. And so we always kind of put a focus on that, like from George's side, that when he's calling vendors, or we have a whole spreadsheet, and so we have like all these vendors, and we'll go through Etsy and we'll look, and it's like, hey, this is really cool. Let's see if we can get them, either to send us some stuff, or some of them show up. Like we're talking to the guy that does the like the Goblin Hut, the Goblin. I think I messed up. Goblin, the paint, like the rust paint or something like that. So it's a cool like product that he's got. And it's unique, and so we're like, hey, we'd love to have you over. And I think he has a 6-month-old, so maybe not this year, but we're going to try to get him next year. So we've been trying to talk to those vendors.
That's the Goblin right there.
Goblin, yeah, Goblin. Some Goblin.
Anyways, bad joke.
I was like, which one's the Goblin? Oh, I see what you're saying. I get it.
Yeah, so that one totally bombed. I might just edit that out anyways. Okay.
Yeah, so that's you have that.
We're
power.
getting close to time here, so I do have one other question, and then we'll wrap it up here. Some of the really big gaming conventions like Adepticon, so on and so forth, have painting competitions associated with them. Is there any plan, or have you guys ever thought of adding that element to the Richmond Open?
So not only is our painting competition so cool, but it's also so secret that you didn't even know about it. So we have what's called our secret painting competition. We've done it for the last, we didn't do it the first year, but we did it the second and third year. And then we're planning on doing it this year. So the way we do it is we have 2 judges, and they have like a sheet with all the criteria and all that stuff. And what they do is, like last year, we actually had a little more formalized, where people actually kind of brought their stuff in and put it on a table, and we judged it and all that. But we still did the secret side. And the secret side is that they walk around and they look at the models that are on the table. Like the models are actually being played, instead of more of that competition side of just painting the models for the competition. And then what we did is we had a lot of prizes. Game Envy, for example, sent us a bunch of stuff. And we would, like, they would walk around and they would present the player. Like when there was a break in the game, we talked, they'd say to the TO, when's the round end? And, they would say, okay, it's another 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So they would circle back around. And then during the break in the round, they would walk up to the player. And we had a person who won, I think it was the best, the first place prize. I can't remember what we called it. It was like convention best or whatever it was. And we walked up and she was playing Kings of War. And she had, I looked at this army and I was like, this is amazing, right? But she was like, I never entered a paint competition. Like she always was just like, I paint this up and I play. And so we presented her with like the first place prize, and we gave her, I think she got a Lucent Light and like a bunch of other stuff. And she was emotional. She was like, this is amazing, because, like she didn't come there to present the models for a painting competition. She came there to play. But we kind of pulled them out, and I think there was probably I think we had 6 people that we highlighted and we gave prizes to, and so we just kind of pull them out and highlight them as you don't think I'm obviously sure they know their work is great, but like you don't think you reach that level where you wanted to be in a painting competition. You just paint it for the table, but it's amazing. Like some of these people, I'm blown away every time I see some of these models. Like I by no means am good at painting. And so I see these things, and it's so our thought was like, how do we kind of reward that, because we're not going to force people to enter a competition. So, we go around and we kind of highlight them and present them with awards and stuff like that. And you can see some of them, I think, on our Facebook page. We've got some of the videos of the presentations. And again, it's just somebody, I know this guy, Tony, he won some brushes and all that stuff. And he's just standing there at the table, and we're presenting him with the award. So, he's like thrown by it. Like, what do you mean my stuff is great? I was like, dude, your stuff is great. Like, it looks amazing. And so we do have a painting competition, but we don't have kind of your formal, Golden Demon or, things that other ones have. We have kind of more of the, on the table painting competition.
I think I'd never heard or thought of such a thing. I think that's incredible, because when you do the official one, like for example, Golden Demon, what you get is the pros who are like, I don't know if they actually do this, but travel to all the different ones to just keep competing in the same, like it's the same painters going against each other over and over and over. I remember seeing a video where one Golden Demon, he said, "Oh yeah, last year I lost to Bob, and I know Bob's going to be there this year." And I think
Right.
it,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a painting competition anymore. It just feels like almost like the painting Olympics. It's like unless you're
Yeah.
super elite, don't bother. Whereas the
Well,
way you're doing it, those who are passionate about it,
yep.
they're going to do it because they're passionate, and then to just surprise someone else thought your paint job was really awesome too.
Exactly. And
I think that's great.
I think there's a level of humbleness to that as well, that, we know that we're not a, 4, 5, 6,000 or, good God, how many does Gen Con have now? Like, 80,000 people or whatever. Like, we know we're not that size when it comes to a convention. So if we put on a painting competition, like a very official one, we wouldn't have Bob who shows up, because Bob's like, well, what are you offering as prizes? Like, I may not, if I'm not local to Richmond, I'm not going to fly there and all that. And so, I mean, there's also that level of like, okay, well, we can't compete with Golden Demon. So what else do we do? And I think that's kind of where it came from is, let's reward the people that are actually coming to play. And, they think they, like I don't know if the people that also won the prizes for the secret painting competition also won their, their tournaments they were in, but they get to, have more prizes and more things they get to walk away with, which I think is always good. And so I think that's where it came from as well, is like, okay, how do we bring something to the table that people think is cool and awesome? But, we obviously don't want to say we're putting on a major painting competition and then, 2 people show up. So, so I mean, there's that level of kind of like understanding how big we are. And, obviously someday we'd like to grow to a good size, but, right now we understand where we're at. And so I think that's kind of where it came from too.
Well, what it's done is you've taken, like you've been saying, most of the emphasis of this, it's about community. It's about
Mhm.
giving a
Definitely.
space to try new games, meet people who play new games, and you've managed to create the painting competition equivalent of a community focused event.
Right. Like, I want
So
to
I
show up
think
at a table and present someone with something who they didn't
they
even
weren't
think they were
expecting it.
part of it, which is really cool.
So well, folks, I think that's the perfect note to end on here. So, just quick reminder in case you don't remember it from the beginning. So, the Richmond Open, May 2nd through the 4th at the Meadow Event Park in Doswell, Virginia. It's about 45 minutes north of downtown Richmond. Nice and centrally located. It's open to whoever wants to show up. The more, the merrier. So, Jeremy, thank you very much for spending some time talking about the Richmond Open.
Yeah.
And
Glad to be
maybe
here.
we'll have you on a future date, talk about how it went, plans for the future, what have you. We'll see. Maybe we can get some of the other folks on the committee to chime in a bit. But to everybody else, thanks for joining us this evening or this afternoon. No offense to any painters who are actually named Bob, right? I pulled that name out. Nothing special there. But until next time, everybody, thanks for listening and keep your dice on the table.